حنبنيه اللي بنحلم بيه ويوماتي حنبنيه اللي بنحلم بيه ويوماتي حنبنيه وطن شامخ وطن عاتي وطن شامخ وطن عاتي وطن خير ديمقراطي وطن مالك زمام أمره وطن مالك زمام أمره متوهج لحق جمره متوهج لحق جمره وطن غالي نجوم تلالي في العالي وطن نجوم تلالي وطن غالي نجوم تلالي في العالي وطن إرادة سيادة حرية إرادة سيادة مكان الفرد تتقدم قيادتنا الجماعية مكان الفرد تتقدم قيادتنا الجماعية مكان السجن مستشفى مكان السجن مكان المنفى كلية مكان المنفى مكان السجن مكان السجن مكان المنفى مكان الأسرى وردية مكان الأسرى مكان الحسرة أمنية مكان قطع الصورة لحل حولنا فورة مكان قطع الصورة لحل حولنا فورة مكان قطع الصورة لحل حولنا فورة وتمازح شفع الروضة أنا بنير بنحلم بيه
مرحبا بكم جميعا مشاهدين منبر صوت الشعب. السلام عليكم أينما كنتم، وأنا سعيد إنه أكون معكم في هذا الصباح بتوقيت الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية. وطبعا الزمن بتكون مساء بتوقيت بتاعت جنوب السودان وتوقيت بتاعت السودان وإيست أفريقيا جنرال. وبرضه طبعا إننا برضه مشاهدين لصوت الشعب وبرضه مستمعين لصوت السودان بوليتيكال كلاب صوت الشعب في فيسبوك، وكذلك الناس المشاهدين في يوتيوب. برضه الوقت تقريبا بالليل في استراليا واوروبا، طبعا مساء في اوروبا وفي افريقيا. فانا سعيد جدا انه اكون معكم في هذا الصباح ونحن نستمر في الحلقة الثانية لحلقات الحلقة اللي بديناها الأسبوع اللي فاتت. وفي الأسبوع اللي فاتت نحن الحلقة كانت باللغة العربية مع جنرال باغانا مومو كيج، وهو القائد بتاعت أو الليدر بتاعت ريال SPLM والناطق الرسمي بتاعت التحالف الناس الغير موقعين على الاتفاقية السلام، وهم اللي بينظموا راوند تيبل شغالين في الإجراءات بتاع الراوند تيبل. الليلة we are actually هنا ماشيين هو الانترفيو هيكون بإنجليزي، يعني نفس الكلام اللي قاله المرة اللي فاتت هيكون بإنجليزي، وبرضه نحن أضيفنا أسئلة تانية برضه هو هيجاوب عليه، وبرضه نحن هنشيل أسئلة من الناس المشاهدين وكذلك الناس المستمعين. أنا لازم أكد إنه الليلة طبعا من الزمن بتاع جنرال نحن ما ناخد زمن كتير من زمنه. الشو بتاعنا هنا في فيسبوك هيكون 2.5 ساعة، وبرضه هيمشي ياخد 1 hour في كلاب هاوس. بعد ذاك نحن ممكن نستمر في نقاش مع الناس التانية، ممكن نجي فوق ونستمر في القضايا اللي طرحت لأنه عنده التزامات تانية هو ماشي يعملهم. فمرحبا بكم جميعا الناس اللي قاعدين في كلاب هاوس. Please share the show. Also those in Facebook and YouTube, share the live video. As I said it earlier in Arabic, today actually the show will be in English, like I promised you guys last week, last Saturday. The same show we did last Saturday in Arabic. Today we are going actually to host General Pagana Mumuki, the leader of Real SPLM, and also the spokesperson of non-signatories to the ARCIS. And he will be talking about the same topic, which he talked about it last week in Arabic, but today the presentation or the interview will be in English. And as I said it earlier, the duration of the show will be 2.5 hours. He will be live with us here in Facebook and YouTube. And then after 2.5 hours, we'll close the show and we'll actually move to Clubhouse, and he will be there for another 1 hour. And then he will leave the discussion. Will remain actually, because we don't want to close the discussion after he left. We'll also continue to listen to those who want to come up and also debate to continue the discussion. So bear with me and please share the video. Share the video, those in Facebook and in YouTube. You cannot share it, but you can share it in Facebook and also those in Clubhouse. Be with me for some minutes. General is actually with us in the studio. Who Mujud. Just wait for a little bit. Please share the video. Yeah, share the video. الناس بتاع عربي نحن طبعا زي ما انا قلت لكم الليله طبعا كويس انتوا برضه تستمعوا، لانه في ناس بيعرفوا انجليزي كتار، وفي ناس برضه في ناس عربي برضه بيعرفوا انجليزي عشان يطوروا برضه انجليزيتهم ويصل نرسل الرساله لكل الشعب بتاعنا في جنوب السودان. خليكم معنا نكمل الغنية بتاعت وردي.
وطن شامخ وطن عادي، وطن شامخ وطن عادي، وطن خير في المنطقة وطن مالك زمام أمره، وطن مالك زمام أمره، متوهج لهب جمره، وطن لالي نجوم تلالي بالعالي، وطن لالي نجوم تلالي بالعالي، سيادة إرادة سيادة إرادة سيادة مكان الفرد تتقدم قيادتنا الجماعية مكان الفرد تتقدم قيادتنا الجماعية مكان السجن مكان السجن مكان المنفى مكان السجن مكان.
Let me welcome General Pagano Mukej on our show. Welcome, General. Nice to see you again.
Thank you so much for welcoming me, and thank you for hosting me. And through you, I greet all your listeners and viewers in all the various platforms. Thank you for hosting me again, and to continue discussing the crisis in our country and how to take the country out of this vicious cycle.
Thank you so much, General Pagan. And let us start our discussion tonight. Let us start with the update. I want you to update the people of South Sudan about the last visit, the meetings of the opposition in Rome, and also the roundtable. Where are we now? So you can update the people and let them actually be in touch about the development and how you guys, the opposition, going to sort the situation in the country. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. This is very important. Between the 9th of October to the 14th of October, we had a number of meetings in Rome. First meeting was Sant'Egidio community, whom were mediating between the non-signatories and the reconstituted government of national unity to try to reach a comprehensive peace agreement and resolve the root crisis in the country. We met with them in light of the development in our country. First, the fact that the transition of 42 months are coming to an end by February 2023, and the reconstituted transitional government of national unity has failed to deliver peace and transition to democracy in South Sudan. The reconstituted transitional government of national unity has failed to implement the revitalized peace agreement, and this is threatening with the country moving into a constitutional crisis by the end of the transition, given the fact that the government has failed to stabilize the country, has failed to bring peace in the country, has failed to implement the peace agreement, and has failed to hand over power to the people of South Sudan as it promised in the peace agreement, for the people to elect their government in free and fair elections by December next month. As a result of this failure, the country now is in a serious stage of national crisis, constitutional crisis, and the country is almost collapsing into chaos. The humanitarian situation is also developing to very serious level, whereby the majority of the people of South Sudan are threatened even to remain alive, threatened with famine and starvation. And we have a serious not only failure of the government, but also compounded by violence all over the country, in a situation where we have a major climate change crisis inducing floods and droughts at the same time. So in face of all this, we, the non-signatories, together with other actors in the civil society, South Sudanese civil society, women leaders and youth leaders, have taken the initiative to call on all the South Sudanese stakeholders to convene a roundtable conference where we can develop a national consensus to rescue the country. We met with Sant'Egidio to seek their support to facilitate this roundtable conference and transform the negotiation that used to be between us and the government into a process of convening all South Sudanese stakeholders to rescue the country, given the situation we are in. We also met with the special envoys of Troika, that is to say, the special envoys of the United States of America, United Kingdom, and Norway, as well as the special envoy to Horn of Africa, including South Sudan, of the European Union. And we discussed with them the need to support South Sudanese to rescue the country with the aim of taking it out of this vicious cycle of failed transitional governments, failed transitional periods, and pervasive conflict all over the country, and rescue the country from collapsing into chaos and disorder. These were very good meetings. We had a very good understanding, and we have agreed to continue engaging. We have also plans. We had plans. We met with the Vatican as well, and we have plans to engage our neighbors in the East African community, in the IGAD, as well as the African Union and the United Nations. All these are in the effort of working to hold a roundtable conference to rescue the country and take the country out of this deep national crisis that we are trapped in. So these were the meetings, and these meetings will also be involving meetings with the government as well as other stakeholders in the same direction. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I was actually about to ask you a follow-up question about the participation of the governments and the other stakeholders in the country in the conference, because there is a concern and discussion going in the clubhouse. People are asking, will the government be the part of roundtable, and what will happen if the government refuses to participate?
Yes, the government, we would want the government to be part of this effort, because basically it is an effort to rescue the country. The current government, which is formed on the basis of the revitalized peace agreement, it is a government that has been given the mandate by that agreement of 42 months, 8 months of pre-transition and 36 months of transition proper. And the government has failed to implement the peace agreement. It is it has also failed to hand over power back to the people to elect their government in free and peaceful elections. And faced with this reality, instead of extension, and we know all extensions have also failed to deliver peace in the country, we are saying let us all go to a roundtable conference where we can put our hands and heads together to take the country out of this trap of vicious violence that we have been reeling under since independence. And this roundtable conference is conceived to be an inclusive process, bringing all the South Sudanese stakeholders, that is to say, the political parties in the government as well as in the opposition, the civil society in the country and outside the country, the religious leaders of South Sudan, and the women leaders, the youth leaders, all of us to come together as equal stakeholders to develop a national consensus to rescue the country. A national consensus that will also be the basis for developing a new social contract as the blueprint for state and nation building, and primarily for stabilizing the country, for reconciling the nation, reuniting the people, and healing the nation, and coming together now to chart a way out of this crisis to build a peaceful, just, and a prosperous country for all South Sudanese. So it is a process that will be inclusive of everybody. Now, if the government refused to participate, which would be very unfortunate, of course, South Sudanese will have then to continue developing that national consensus, including on how to deal with a government that is refusing to cooperate to take the country out of this crisis, and therefore it becomes part of the problem to be dealt with. Thank you.
Thank you, General Pagan. Let me ask you the last follow-up question in regard to the briefing. What is the basic concept of the roundtable, and why is it important to the people of South Sudan? Because I have to ask this question because I observe the contradictions and confusion among the South Sudanese in regard to roundtable. So you have to make that clear to them now. Thank you.
Thank you. This is very important. The concept of the roundtable is based on the reality that South Sudan today, after independence, we have entered a very serious national crisis that is characterized by failed transition to peace and democracy, and not only one transition. From independence, we've had 5 transitions that have all failed, with 5 dysfunctional transitional governments. And part of this national crisis is country going into war, which started as factional wars between the various factions of SPLM, the SPLM in government and the SPLM in opposition. A war that has also been joined by others, different factions, armed groups, and political parties in the country, and leading to signing of peace agreements and formation of other transitional governments which fail to implement the peace agreement. That is the crisis, which I call South Sudan being trapped in a vicious cycle of failed transition, leading to wars, signing of peace agreement, formation of failed and dysfunctional transitional government that fails to usher the country into peace and democracy. And that cycle is going on, but every cycle leads to even a worse deepening crisis in the country, like today, for example. We are just reaching an end of the last cycle of a failed transition and a dysfunctional transitional government, but the country is now in what has been called pervasive communal conflict, which are factional conflicts and wars, which has the hands of the government or the parties in the government behind these wars. Whether you look at the war in Upper Nile or the conflict in Jonglei or the conflict in Western Equatoria or the conflict in Central Equatoria or Eastern Equatoria, all these are conflict in which the country now is trapped in. Even in states like Warab, Western Bahr Ghazal, this is where we are. And what we are saying is that all the negotiations between the parties, all the conflicts between the parties have led to negotiations and to formation of transitional government, and all have failed. Now, if we are to take the country out of this crisis, we believe that we have to go into a process, a new process of bringing together all the South Sudanese stakeholders and avoid the repetition of the same cycle. How do we do that? Number one, we are saying, instead of limiting search for solution to the problem to the parties to the conflict, those who are fighting the war, or to the political elites in the country, that is to say, the political parties and political leaders and leaders of the armed organizations waging war, whether on the side of the government or on the side of the opposition, limiting the process of search for peace to them has failed to produce peace in the country. Despite the many peace agreements, despite the many transitional government forms by these parties to the conflict and or political elites in the country, this has failed. Now, let us bring in all the South Sudanese stakeholders as equal stakeholders to solve the problem in the country and to come together and build a national consensus. That is to say, bring together the political parties in the government and the political parties in the opposition. That's one group. Bring in the leaders of our civil society organizations, bring in our religious leaders, bring in our women leaders, bring in our youth leaders, and all of us together as equal stakeholders, sit around a table to develop a national consensus as a basis to build a new social contract to be the blueprint to take the country out of the crisis, and to think of a new transitional process, which would be a totally new dispensation. Think of a new transitional mechanism, a government that will not be dysfunctional like the 5 dysfunctional governments we had. That is to say, we would like, as all of us South Sudanese, to think outside the box of a solution which is not making us repeat the same thing and expect a different outcome. That is the core of the idea of the Roundtable Conference. Instead of us engaging in conflict, let us now come together, unite, and engage to solve our problem. All South Sudanese, whether you are in the government or you are in the opposition, whether you are in civil society or you are a woman organization or a woman leader who is dealing with this crisis that is affecting you, come and join hands with others to solve this problem. Whether you are a youth leader, come and join, because this is your future. That is how we are conceiving it. It is an inclusive process. It is a process aimed not at negotiating, but rather as aimed at collaborating to solve the problem we have. The problem is our problem as South Sudanese. And the problem has reached a level that South Sudan today is in danger of disintegrating as a nation. It is divided up along tribal lines. Our communities are made to kill themselves, to be fighting, and our sense of oneness is challenged. This is a problem we want to solve. All of us as South Sudanese, we want to stabilize South Sudan. We want to bring peace among South Sudanese. It will be our peace, and we work together to bring it. We develop mechanisms to implement it instead of continuing conflict among ourselves. It is time to rescue the country. In this, we collaborate and we come together. That is the core idea. Because we've reached a point that South Sudan is in danger of disintegration. South Sudan state is in danger of collapsing into chaos and disorder. You can see it. Our state today has lost its capacity to protect lives and property of all South Sudanese citizens. It has no capacity. It has lost that capacity. Our state today is not capable of managing our economy or growing our economy or creating wealth for us. And we are getting poorer and poorer. Our state is not capable of creating a situation or condition of stability for our people to be able to maintain even at least their traditional mechanism of food security, of subsistence agriculture. It is not there. Even There is no environment to farm, no environment to keep our livestock secure, to provide food security for us. Our agriculture has collapsed, and the government is not in a position to achieve any economic recovery. Our government is not in a position to provide education for our children. Our government is not able to provide health services for our people. So if it cannot provide security or protect lives and property of the citizen, and it cannot provide social services, we need to do something to rebuild the state instead of allowing it to increasingly collapse. So the idea is for us to come together, unite ourselves, rescue our country, and agree on new mechanisms and even new form of government that will take us out from this crisis, from this conflict and violence, to peace and stability,
Thank
where
you.
we can now rebuild the state and begin to release the creative energies of our people to create wealth and to build it from scratch.
Thank you so much, General Pagan. There is, I want you to make a comment on this before I could go to the last point. So, and then we will go to the question of the topic tonight. So there is a statement actually issued by United States of America Embassy in South Sudan, a statement of the U.S. Embassy in Juba about the comment made by Information Minister Michael McQuay concerning the American journalist Christopher Allens, who was killed in 2017, in August 2017, covering the clashes between the SPLM in opposition and the SPLM ID in the government. So the comment made by Michael McQuay during on the International Day to End the Impunity for the Crime Against Journalists, and Michael McQuay, he said Alan Christopher actually was killed because he is a white rebel. And American government, American embassy in Juba, they actually condemned the statement by the information minister, Michael McQuay, and also they are asking clarification from the government of South Sudan. Is that a statement said by Michael McQuay, is that the position of the government of South Sudan? So what are you saying in regard to this? Because he was a commander at the SPLM, and during the war between South and North, which was fought by the SPLM, SPLA, there was also the journalists covering the wars. I think, you don't want me to tell you that. So can you make a short comment, then we move forward, General? Thank you.
First of all, this is very unfortunate. The comments and statement by Minister Michael McQuay was very unfortunate and also irresponsible. As a journalist, Christopher Allen was trying to cover the war that was happening in South Sudan, whether on the side of the rebel, or also there are other journalists who were on the side of the government who have also lost their lives. And the government of South Sudan has made the life of journalists and the danger against their life very real. And South Sudan is one of the most dangerous places for journalists in the world. And the impunity of the government against journalists is demonstrated very clearly by that irresponsible statement by Michael McCoy, even from the sense of decency. If he was killed on the side of the rebel, having been killed and they got the body, uh, the most decent thing that they could do is to just share the facts, do the investigation, and exactly on how he died. If he died as not intentionally, not killed intentionally by the government, this they could provide and also present it in such a way that show humanity and not to be, uh, you know, trashing uh, the journalist even after he has lost his life without respecting the feelings of the family. But this is a comment made on an international day to end impunity against journalists and journalism in the world, and that shows the height of brutality and a sense of impunity to violate human rights, not only of foreign journalists, but even of South Sudanese journalists. How many journalists that have been disappeared in South Sudan? How many journalists that have been arrested and tortured simply because they either criticized the government or published information or tried to publish information uh, about the government to bring it to the public? There are so many of them. And South Sudan is not only one of the worst places, or actually the worst place for journalists in the world, it is also the worst place for humanitarian workers, even humanitarian workers who come to assist our people. Their life is in danger. Many of them, more than 150, have been killed in South Sudan. And South Sudan is one of the worst places in the world for women. Even violence against women has reached its height in South Sudan. And all this are showing that the type of government we have is a government that is increasing in its impunity to violate human rights of journalists, of humanitarian workers, of women, and of children, as well as of young people. Uh, this is these are signs of the crisis we are in. Thank you.
Thank you, General Pagan, for answering that question. Actually, also, the last comment will be on the United Nations warns against food insecurity in South Sudan, November 3rd, 2022. Just I want to read quotation here so then you can make comment because it's very important before we continue the discussion. The report shows about 2/3 of the South Sudanese population, 7.76 million people, are likely to face acute food insecurity during the April-July 2023, the lean season, while 1.4 million children will be malnourished. These include a projected 2.9 million on the brink of starvation, the IPC Pass 4, and another 43,000 who are expected to be living in catastrophic, the IPC Pass 5, acute food insecurity. There would be 47 counties with the majority of population in emergency. IPC Pass 4 during the 2023 lean season. What is your comment, General Pagan, on this report? Thank you.
These are the humanitarian manifestation of the national crisis we are talking about. And this national crisis is reflected in the collapse of our subsistent economy because of insecurity and lack of government capacity to bring support in terms of stability, in terms of support to our farmers to be able to produce their own food, but also lack of capacity to manage climate change with the situation getting complicated with floods or droughts. This is the situation, and the humanitarian crisis is actually growing as part of the failure of the state and as part of the violence and reduction in capacity of the government that we have. And this is a process that is growing for the last 11 years. Every year, the humanitarian crisis is growing from 1 million people being in danger of starvation in 2012 to nearly 8 million. It's actually 8 point something million. This is 2/3 of the population. Knowing that actually more than 1/3 of the population are already outside the country. They are refugees. So in totality, you are talking of more than 95% of the population of South Sudan are dependent on international humanitarian assistance to survive. Whether in the refugee camps, in the neighboring countries, or inside the country as displaced, or as people in the countryside or in the towns and cities who have no any source of income, who have no any means of supporting themselves. They have lost their capacity of producing their own food. That is the crisis we are talking about. And while we appeal to the international community, to the donor community, to come to the help of South Sudanese, the solution is in stabilizing the country. The solution is in bringing a change in the country holistically in terms of taking the country out of this vicious cycle in which the country is trapped in, where we have dysfunctional governments that are not capable of addressing or solving any problem. That is the only way to take the country out of this crisis, to stabilize the country. And therefore, the country, what it needs most is a new dispensation, is a new transition to peace that we must ensure is successful, which will lead to stabilize the country, which will lead to creating conditions for the people to resettle back home. It will lead to having a government that will have the capacity not only to reconcile the people and stop the conflicts that are spreading, but a government that is capable to rebuild our agriculture and bring support to it in the new environment of climate change that is existing. That is where the solution lies, especially that the world is also going through very serious changes with wars in Europe and with the emergence of a new international order, which is characterized with emergence of a new Cold War between the West and the East, and in which vulnerable systems like in South Sudan will face very serious challenges, including even in terms of access to humanitarian needs. If you can see in that report and in other reports of United Nations, they are talking of challenges of meeting the needs because of lack of funding. And because there are crises all over the world, crisis induced by the war in Ukraine and by climate changes, which is hitting various parts of the world as well. So we need to go for a solution that addresses the systemic crisis while we meet the needs for our people and achieve a process of rehabilitation and recovery.
A short follow-up question, General Fagan. Do you think the so-called government in South Sudan or regime in Juba, do they care really about this kind of report, this kind of warning?
I don't think that they care. They are actually overwhelmed by the trap itself, and they are trapped, whether as individual leaders or as a government as a whole. The government is dysfunctional. It has no capacity to do anything. So, how can it care? What can it do? It is not capable of addressing this problem. That is why South Sudanese stakeholders have to come together and address the crisis of governance in South Sudan and take the country out of this crisis. The humanitarian situation is just a manifestation of the national crisis that we are in.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, General Fagan. We'll start talking on the topic, and I think we will just talk today. We'll take like 5 questions only, and then we'll take questions from our audience, the listeners in Clubhouse and those in Facebook and YouTube. The fractionalization of the SPLM and the national crisis. Actually, before we go forward and talk about the splintering of SPLM into functions after the independence of South Sudan in 2011. Can you talk about the vision, objective, the mission of the SPLM? And then we will go into that question. And also I want you to include that with what was the failure of the SPLM after signing the peace agreement in 2005 up to the 2011 before the independence of South Sudan. Thank you, General.
Thank you. The The SPLM SPLA as an organization was formed.
I'm listening to you. I will put myself down because it's good. We sometimes make when we cut this one,
Okay.
you be alone. Speaking is good, so we share it. I will put
All right.
myself.
Thank you. The SPLM SPLA as an organization was formed to address the crisis of the post-colonial state in Sudan. The post-colonial state in Sudan emerged as a failed state because after or with the independence, the founding fathers of the Sudanese state made a mistake of conceiving a state and nation building project on limited parameters of the diverse reality of Sudan. They had a vision of building an Arab Islamic state, which essentially excluded the majority of the Sudanese. And it made those who were excluded either to demand being included, like South Sudan, for example. South Sudanese were demanding establishment of a federal system where the South will be able to administer their own affairs while joining together with the North in running the country on the basis of what is common between the South and the North. And that was denied. That led to war. And the Sudanese state was engulfed in civil wars between the government in the center in Khartoum and the South. These wars expanded to include all the marginalized areas of southern Blue Nile, Nuba Mountain, Darfur, Eastern Sudan, and the far north. And all were demanding to be included. So the SPLM came up with a vision, an inclusive vision, to build a Sudanese state for all Sudanese without discrimination. A state built on secular citizenship. A citizen state in the sense that it is based on what unites all Sudanese, and that is the citizenship without discrimination on the basis of ethnicity or race or religion or the region you come from or gender. That is the core vision of SPLM. And in this direction, the struggle continued to bring the transformation of the whole Sudan. By 2004, 2005, we reached a historical compromise between the SPLM calling for a new Sudan, a new Sudanese state built on an inclusive vision and program, a nation and state building project that is inclusive of every Sudanese, and the most extreme old Sudan forces, the Islamic movement of Sudan, which wanted to build a strictly Islamic state in Sudan, which is even much more narrower than the Arab Islamic state. It is now Islamic state. which is extreme political Islam with very limited interpretation. That is even discriminating against the majority of the Muslims in Sudan, especially the followers of the Sufist orders and the non-Muslims. And also it embedded racial discrimination as well. That historical compromise led to separation in Sudan, where the South, the people of South Sudan, not seeing any possibility of building a Sudan that belongs to all, so the only option for them were to build their own state in South Sudan, and the emergence of South Sudan through the exercise of right of self-determination. And the SPLM divided themselves into two. SPLM North to pursue the project of transformation of Sudan, in northern Sudan, and the SPLM to build a state, an inclusive state in South Sudan, a state that belongs to all South Sudanese. Now, what happened is that the top leadership of SPLM, in the person of General Salva Kiir, betrayed and abandoned the vision of SPLM that would have given us the framework and the basis for a state and nation building at independence. He chose a different path, different from the vision of SPLM. This led to the majority of the membership of SPLM in 2012 to express the view that the leadership has left the vision of SPLM and has lost direction. Which led to an internal process of debate to correct the mistake, to return to the vision, and to correct the direction. Especially now that South Sudan was an independent country and the historical task was to build a state that belongs to all South Sudanese and to build a nation out of all the ethnic groups in South Sudan, unite them to live in peace and harmony and build a peaceful, just and prosperous country for all South Sudanese. This led to internal discussion within the leadership of SPLM. And unfortunately, President Kiir, rejecting the return to the vision of SPLM, introduced violence to silence all those voices in the leadership which were calling for democratization of the party and for the return to the vision of the SPLM and implementation of its program in government. That took the country to war, and with that, with the violence, the SPLM is split it into three factions. That is how the failure of SPLM came about in implementing its vision and articulating it as a program for state and nation building, and going into wars as a factional war between that SPLM faction under President Kiir, having entrenched itself in government, and the SPLM-IO under the first deputy of the SPLM, who was the first vice president of the government of South Sudan under Dr. Riek Machar, the SPLM-IO. That civil war ended with signing of a peace agreement, and the attempt to reunite the SPLM, facilitated by Chama Machama Punduzi and the ANC and NRM and others, led to the signing of the Arusha Agreement and many other conferences in Entebbe and Kampala and Addis Ababa and South Africa. With the peace agreement and the Arusha Agreement, again, President Kiir rejected the return to the vision of SPLM and obstructed the implementation of the Arusha Agreement. He also refused to sign the peace agreement, though later on he signed it, but campaigned continuously against it. And when they begin to implement the agreement, the government that was formed on the basis of that agreement lasted only 4 months. Then they took the country back to war again. And that was the vicious cycle of failed governments and failed transition, leading to no implementation and extensions of government. That is where the SPLM failed to implement its program because the top leadership dishonored that vision and moved away from that path to a different path. And that is how the country went into war, and that's how the country got trapped into failed transitions. Thank you.
Thank you, General Pagan. Let's talk about the failure of the state and nation building in South Sudan.
Yes, the failure of state and nation building, as I said, it is a failure of dishonoring the vision of SPLM, which provided a clear path for building a state in an underdeveloped situation like South Sudan. That also provided a vision on how to build a nation out of many ethnic groups. And that vision was an inclusive vision of making sure that you build a nation respecting and managing the diversities of the people, including everybody, so that, as John Garang said, you build a nation to which everybody find themselves and they develop a sense of belonging to that nation because they are included, because they are active participant and beneficiary, because their interests are included, because it becomes a nation that will fulfill their dream of a better life, of achieving prosperity, of restoring dignity. That project of building a state which you take the people to be at the center of the attention and care of the state. A state in that sense become a servant state. The only reason for it to be there as a state is not to oppress the people, not to pursue different interests different from the interests of the people, but rather to serve the people. A state that would serve the people by protecting their lives and properties, by instituting a rule of law, a state that will develop their capabilities and release their energies to create wealth for every citizen and every family to rebuild their lives, having now achieved our independence and our freedom, and now that we have our own state. A state that would lead the people to achieve rapid economic and socio-economic development, a state that will carry out a literacy campaign so that all South Sudanese citizens, especially those who did not have the opportunity to go to school, to learn how to read and write, and to learn how to write in terms of numeracy, to know the numbers, to crunch the numbers, so that they can count well their production and their to calculate their family business, and to bring education to all the children, regardless of the wealth of their parents. And education here becomes a right for all the young people so that you build their capacity and also create jobs for those who graduate in the economy. Create an environment where you attract investment from outside, where you also develop industries from the resources that you have, starting with developing agriculture and then moving into processing these agricultural produce to produce consumer goods in the country and substitute imports, and encourage investment from outside to develop the economy, creating jobs and creating wealth in the country, and expanding the tax base through the expansion of economic activities. And as you expand the tax base, you also provide more and deeper and larger social services, and you build more infrastructure. That is the type of a state that we need in South Sudan. Unfortunately, President Kiir, as the top leadership that was supposed to provide the leadership in this direction, opted to a different path. It was a path of a state capture. It was a path of allowing corruption and enrichment by diverting resources from the state, and creation of a parasitic business linked to looting the state through fictitious contracts or contracts which are not implemented. And that way, it led to state capture and development of what came to be known in South Sudan as a kleptocracy. And that was a choice away from the type of state the SPLM wanted to build. If you remember, Dr. John was saying when the SPLM become a government, it must make sure that it serves the people. And if it fails to serve the people, even the people will throw it into the sea. That is the type of government John Garang was talking about, the SPLM was talking about. Now, SPLM coming to power, unfortunately, with John Garang, losing John Garang in that tragic loss, Salva Kiir came and charted a different path altogether. And that path led to the current crisis that we have. And today, it is a matter of also for South Sudanese, including President Kiir, choosing to either go back or agreeing on a new path of what type of a state we need to build in South Sudan today. A state that is capable of serving the people, of accelerating socio-economic development, of creating conditions for sharing wealth, creating wealth and sharing it in a just manner, and achieving even development in the country. It is about South Sudanese choosing the path. The SPLM came to say, let us build a nation out of all the tribes. President Kiir chose a path of dividing the people through politicizing ethnicity, introducing tribalism, introducing regional sectarianism in the country, away from the vision of SPLM. So today, it is also a choice for South Sudanese, including President Kiir, that we heal the nation, we choose a new project of nation building by uniting all the 64 tribes and ethnic groups in South Sudan and creating a sense of oneness, a sense of belonging together, a sense of a common future, and a project of common prosperity for all without discrimination. These are the choices that we have. We have gone on the path that has led to failure of a state and nation building, and it has led us to the current crisis that we are dealing with. And our choices are to pull back South Sudan from the edge of the abyss and change direction into the path of a consensual nation and state building project. Thank you.
Thank you so much, General. Let me take a question from our sister here, Nyan Gok D. Dongwei. Actually, she asking that question also is connected with your answer. Do you think the SPLM party will come to its senses to save the country? Or do you think it is too late, or it is a time for people of South Sudan to look for a different party to take the country out of the crisis we are facing? This question is for Mr. Paganamum.
Today, it is no longer an issue of SPLM. The call today is for all South Sudanese stakeholders, including herself, whether she is a member of SPLM or not. We are all to come together in a national dialogue to develop a national consensus as a new basis for state and nation building. A national consensus to rescue our country. A national consensus to reconcile our people, to heal ourselves as a nation, and to unite ourselves by discovering our common dream. We have been driven not by opposition to those who have oppressed us, or those who have occupied us, or to those who have enslaved us. What united us from generation to generation is more than resisting the oppressors. And sometimes people would ask the question, now that we are free from the North and the Jalaba who have oppressed us, what is it that unites us? Or what is it that will keep us united? I believe from time immemorial, South Sudanese have come together just not to break the chains, but to make their common dream come true. What is our common dream? We dream to have a country that we call our own, where we are first-class citizens in it, all South Sudanese, irrespective of the ethnic group you belong to. This is your country. You are a first-class citizen in it. You restore your dignity in it. We have struggled not just to be free. We have struggled to be free so that we can build our nation, change our life, create wealth, and build a better life for ourselves and for our children, for this generation and for the coming generation. And that is the South Sudanese dream. It has always made us to draw together and come together. It made us to unite. It made us to queue in long lines to vote. That was the dream that made us to vote overwhelmingly, with more than 90, almost 99% point something. And that common aspiration is what has driven us. Now it is what we need to rearticulate. It will be the basis for us to come together again, so that we can build as we sing in our national anthem. You see, we sing in our national anthem of a motherland upholding us united in peace and harmony, in which we sing songs of freedom with joy. A motherland where the values of liberty, justice, and prosperity shall forevermore reign. That is a dream there. That is a dream which we sing. Now, the question is, how do we achieve that? By stopping all these conflicts among us by stabilizing South Sudan, by reconciling, healing, and uniting ourselves as a nation, and by building a state that is focused on serving the people. And it is South Sudanese to build themselves. It is South Sudanese actually transforming themselves into a state where they can secure their homeland, protecting lives and properties of each and every citizen, providing free education to all the children of a school going age, of carrying out literacy campaign, of building health institution, of building infrastructure, of providing clean water to all the citizens. That is the project there. And it is possible. And we are not saying this is a new idea. No. It has always been with us from generation to generation. Now, we need to come together as South Sudanese stakeholders, agree on how to take ourselves out of this crisis, agree on what form of government that we will have in the transition to avoid these dysfunctional governments that have been formed by the political elites in the country, agree on a new stable political system in the country and its ground rules, not only among the political organizations and parties and how parties are formed, but also on how the power is entrenched in the hands of the people to elect their government periodically in free and fair elections, peaceful elections, and in which violent power struggle disappears from our life. And it is a question of agreement. Now, at that time, political parties can come together or can reunite or even form larger coalition on the basis of visions and political programs. Those who genuinely believe in the ideas of SPLM, as articulated by our late leader, Dr. John Garang de Mumbior, will coalesce around that program. Those who believe in a different project and a different program and different vision, even those who were part of the SPLM, could also form their own parties. And in that political system, the people will be the judge. Who will serve them better? And the people will make their choice in each and every elections. That is how we come out from this crisis. It's not necessarily only with the SPLM reuniting. Yes, the SPLM can reunite, but on the basis of returning to the vision. It is not just unity, like, for example, it is being done now by President Kiir, where you abandon and you leave the ideas of SPLM and the program of SPLM, and individuals return to follow Chairman Kiir without following the program. And you can ask yourself, what is the program that President Kiir has been implementing since he has been in power all this time. Is that SPLM program or NCP program, or what type of program is it? I believe it is not SPLM program. And that type of unity is a unity against the SPLM vision and against the SPLM state and nation building project. That is why we are in crisis now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, General Pagan, for the answer. Before actually I move to the second question, there is a question here from Deacon Francis. I want you to answer it before I move to the third question. But I want you, as a follow-up to your answer, I want to read this quotation from Dr. Jongaran, and I want you to actually to make a comment about it. People accuse me of killing our sons and eating up people farms produce for nothing. But let me tell you this, our blood will be shed because I hate oppression and marginalization of our people, but I will not even enjoy the fruits of this struggle. There are people sleeping comfortably right now. They don't know the hunger or the sound of gun. After our job is done, that generation will take over. They will cut a large piece of land with fungus and sell it cheaply for the bottle of a beer. Dr. Jongaran Dimobior, 1990. Can you make this?
I don't think that was a quote from Dr. John. Somebody has attributed it
Yes.
to Dr. John, but I doubt that it was Dr. John who said it. Maybe that is paraphrasing Dr. John in many of his statements similar to that. So it is something that I believe is written by somebody who is not happy with how things developed after Dr. John died. And in which he was basically saying that the vision of SPLM is going to be betrayed, and the state will be hijacked by people who have no vision and no sense of serving the people. They will sell the land, they will sell the resources of the country, and they will loot it for their own private interest. That is what is meant by the person who has written, which of course, these are things that have happened when the vision of John Garang and the vision of SPLM has been betrayed, and that is the type of state that we have now. That is what I can say.
Thank you so much. I think we remain.
The solution is to go back to the vision of SPLM, to serve the people, create a state that serves the people, and unite the people of South Sudan and build a nation out of all of them in a process that is inclusive and just to everyone.
There is a question from Deacon Francis. He actually posted that question in Clubhouse, and he was asking you, are you going to engage the religious base face in suggested roundtable talks? And if answer is yes, then how? For example, are they invited as a full participant or just observers? Thank you, General.
Yes, as I said, we want all South Sudanese stakeholders, including our religious leaders, to participate as equal stakeholders, as participants, not as observers as it used to be. You know, the search for peace in South Sudan has been limited to the political elite in the country, which resulted into governments formed by the parties to the conflict, which have become very dysfunctional. This time round, we would like our religious leaders to participate, to provide solutions and to be part of the implementation of the programs itself. This is what we want, as well as also wanting to make sure that our women, and women represent the majority of South Sudanese population, and the national crisis we are in today is a crisis that is affecting our women disproportionately in a very negative way. First of all, the violence against women has increased, and the marginalization of women in our community, in our society, has also increased. The economic crisis in South Sudan is placing much more greater burden on our women, and therefore the participation of a woman in the design of the new system that will be sensitive to the rights and to the life of women is very, very important. And their participation as equal stakeholders. Actually, most of the peace talks, when it was limited to the political elites in the country, it had very limited representation of women. And when women participated, they were just observers and not as equal stakeholders in the country, having a stake in the nation itself when they are the majority. The same thing for youth. Today, the youths are the one being made to fight all these wars. They are the one now losing a lot of lives, and they are the one displaced, marginalized, and they are the one losing their own future. Even education is not going well, and even those who graduate from secondary schools or from some vocational training anywhere in the refugee camps or in the neighboring countries or from the universities in the country, they do not get jobs because the type of economy that we have is not an economy that avail opportunities and that creates jobs for young people. And therefore, they are a very important stakeholder. And because we are also talking about not the present situation, but also the future. And that future belongs to them. And therefore, they need to participate in this roundtable conference.
Thank you so much. Let's go back to the question. Actually, I think there is some question I need to ask. The question I have, and there is question from the people in the clubhouse, and I will take those questions and ask you, and then we will end with the discussion with you. No need for you to move again to the clubhouse. We'll let you go, and then just I record it. It will be recorded completely, like 3 hours. Let's take 3 hours here in Facebook and clubhouse. Then we will go there. The third question is actually is regarding the functional wars and civil wars in the country. What is the driving forces, General Pagan, for those wars?
First of all, the civil war started as a factional war between two SPLM factions, the SPLM in government and the SPLM in opposition. These were two SPLM factions. When President Kiir introduced violence in the internal political debate we were having in 2012 and 2013, in preparation to go to the third SPLM National Convention on issues of failure of SPLM in implementing its program, the state and nation building programs with the SPLM government. That brought in changes, and that debate was stopped with taking the country to war. Unfortunately, this factional conflict and war also took the dimension of tribal conflict. Ethnicity was politicized, and instead of being a disagreement or even a conflict because of political differences within the SPLM, ethnicity has been dragged in, and the war literally was taken into the direction of an ethnic war, particularly as a war between the Dinka and the Nuer. And politicizing tribe, which is introducing tribalism in the country and targeting our citizens simply on their ethnic ground, became a very unfortunate development. And actually, in this, President Kiir is responsible for introducing this. If you remember, when he went to the 4 states of Barghazal before the war, he was talking and mobilizing against our Nuer people as citizens. And as a president of a country, you cannot say the Nuers are the enemy when they are the people who actually voted for you. How can you turn them into an enemy just all of a sudden? And that was very unfortunate. And when President Kiir would talk that he does not want the repeat of 1991, where the SPLM Nasser faction was being accused or was accused of leading massacres in Bor, and that is a reference to it. This directly became the ground for targeting our citizens from Nuer nationality and others in Juba, which led to a backlash of also targeting our citizens from Dinka nationality in places like Kobo, Bor, Bailit, and other places. And it took that unfortunate dimension. It was political and it was factional from the beginning. And that is where moving away from the vision of SPLM, where it can lead us in terms of dividing the people, and where it can lead us in terms of destroying the state itself and destroying the social fabric of the people, a problem that is continuing today. And you can see it even a problem that is continuing, whereby even not only tribes are pushed against tribe, but even clans are pushed against clans within one tribe. If you can see, for example, the fighting in eastern Upper Nile, or the fighting in western Upper Nile among the Nuer people, supporters of the government and supporters of SPLM-IO, and for example, the last battles of war between the forces of Commissioner of Mayom and the Commissioner of Lair, and that terrible crisis, or what we see now between Abyei and Tuch, or in northern Tony, or what we see in western Bahr Ghazal. What is happening in Western Bahr Ghazal essentially began as a factional war between SPLM-IG supporters and SPLM-IO, and it is taken a tribal dimension of Zande versus Blanda, uh, and that is how the society is being broken down, and the communities, even communities that live together for centuries uh, in peace, are being divided. That is caused by moving away from the ideas and the thinking of SPLM that unites people, that build a nation out of many tribes with a sense of justice and belonging. The movement away from the ideas that build a state that will serve all the citizens without any discrimination, to a state that is controlled by cliques and small groups, covering up and exploiting tribal allegiances to mobilize support. This is actually not a war between or among our tribes or clans. No. These are factional war, they are political in nature, but these leaders are exploiting our reality of living as different tribes or different clans within tribes, exploiting that as an easy tool of, of mobilization to pursue their own clique interest and personal agendas. There is no single tribe that is benefiting from this. There is no single tribe that is even ruling in the country or being ruled in the country. But tribes are being exploited using tribalism, using sectarian ideas to divide people and blindfold people. And that is the crisis that we have, and we need to disentangle ourselves from this, come back to the ideas that unites us, come back to the project that will make us build a nation out of all South Sudanese and build a state that will serve all South Sudanese as equal citizens. Thank you.
Thank you so much, General Pagan. Let's actually move to the failure of reunification of the SPLM and your dismissal from the SPLM and also from the political bureau with Dr. Riek Machar. What are you saying about this?
Well, after the SPLM divided itself,
and also
on the ideas,
I want you to actually to take this question also with you. Will you think one day the SPLM will unite again? You guys will come together.
Okay.
Thank you.
The SPLM divided itself up because first, the top leadership lost the vision and direction and the program of the SPLM. Having abandoned the program of SPLM, we entered into a debate in 2012, 2013 to return to the vision of SPLM, to implement the program of SPLM by the SPLM government. That led to war and this violence. The SPLM is split into three factions. We went to Arusha, and what is the Arusha Agreement? The Arusha Agreement is basically to return to the vision of SPLM to democratize the SPLM, with the vision and internal democracy, the SPLM will reunite, and then it goes back to the people to apologize to the people of South Sudan for the mistakes it has committed, and also apologize for the atrocities that some of the SPLM leaders have led their followers to commit atrocities, especially in the war, but also in the governance. Now, the most unfortunate thing is that, honestly speaking, and I would like to be very honest here and very candid, that President Kiir and the SPLM in government decided not to return to the vision and program of SPLM. And they obstructed the implementation of the Arusha Agreement. The SPLM in government under the leadership of President Kiir only saw the Arusha Agreement as only a return to the other factions, to the SPLM in government, without the SPLM in government changing its direction, changing its policies that it has been implementing. And therefore, unity for them is inclusion of the other factions into the SPLM IG and program. Betraying the program of SPLM, the real program of SPLM, the real vision of SPLM. And it was on that thinking that they decided to make the decision to remove Dr. Riek Machar from being a member of political bureau and first deputy chair of the SPLM, and remove me as being the Secretary General of the SPLM. But in actual fact, there is no unity of the original SPLM. There is no return to the vision and program of the SPLM. And you can see that the current SPLM in government, even after the unity of they have declared in Juba in few months or a few weeks ago, that SPLM actually marginalizes the top leadership of SPLM. Look at how the structure of the top leadership in terms of political bureau. Does the political bureau takes the strategic decisions of the SPLM in government? No, it doesn't. Does the top leadership participate in providing leadership, including leadership in the government? The reality is no. Let us look at it. Look at the share of the SPLM in government after their reunification. That political bureau, you have somebody like James Wanega. In actual fact, even though he is a vice president, but you can see very clearly he is marginalized. Taban Dengai is a deputy president, is a vice president, and he's a member of the political bureau. He was the first vice president at a certain time. He is now a vice president. Is he really part of decision-making process and provision of leadership? I doubt. Madam Rebecca Garang, she's Rebecca Dumumbior. She is the vice president, holding the position, the top position of the FDs. She's a member of political bureau. Is she part of decision making in the SPLM and the SPLM IG component of the government? I doubt. But then you have somebody like Daniela Wenacott. He's not featuring anywhere. Kwal Manyang, Nial Deng, Paul Mayom, Akol Paul. All these 5 members of the political bureau, they are not anywhere in the decision-making processes. You can see that President Kiir is working with Vice President Hussein Abdel Baghi, though he is the leader of the SAWA, holding the top position of SAWA parties, but is much more closer to President Kiir. Somebody like Tut Galwak, popularly known as Tut Cow, is the advisor to the president on security, but he is more advisor on political affairs. He is engaged in diplomatic missions, and is engaged in negotiations for the country, and all that. He is even not a member of the political bureau. But President Kiir empowers him and is more powerful. And many others who are more powerful than even the members of the political bureau. While you have members of political bureau are being marginalized as we speak. In that SPLM, which is known as SPLM IG, they don't like it, but that is the name that was given to them by the mediators in the process of trying to mediate this factional conflict that erupted in South Sudan, which has now become a deep national crisis that we are facing. So you have SPLM in name, and in whose names program of state capture, programs of corruption, programs of dividing the people, programs of destroying the state and destroying the nation are being implemented in the name of SPLM. Because that are the real program being implemented by President Kiir. There are programs against the SPLM core values, against the SPLM vision, contrary to the SPLM mission, and in which the SPLM itself is totally marginalized. It is not a ruling party. Kir is ruling in the name of SPLM with others, but not for the SPLM, not with SPLM ideas, not implementing SPLM program, but against them. Thank you. I don't think SPLM will unite on that basis. That is, unite against the SPLM ideals. That will not happen. I don't think it will come.
Thank you, General. There is a comment here from Will Nyok. Actually, he was adding to what you say, but I want you to make comment on actually, he has a question here. All that was engineered by the regime in Juba to keep them in power and to kill, loot the properties of South Sudan citizens. For all these reasons, the country will be reunited after the President Salva Kiir Mayardit leave the power. What do you think, General Pagan?
Not necessarily. The country can actually now unite when President Kiir is in power, and that is the core of the proposal by the non-signatories to call on all the South Sudanese stakeholders to come together in a roundtable conference, while President Kiir is the president. And it is possible that President Kiir can agree to a new dispensation in which he leaves power. You remember in 2018, he asked a very important question which South Sudanese must be ready to answer. He asked if he agrees to an idea or to a new transitional dispensation without him being part of it, what will be his incentive? He asked that question in 2018.
Yes.
What will be my incentive?
Yes.
And I believe that this is a very important question for South Sudanese to answer. What are South Sudanese ready to create as incentive for President Kiir to let go of South Sudan, to stabilize, to allow South Sudanese to build a new transitional system that will bring peace and stability in the country, to unite the country? What incentive are South Sudanese ready to build and provide for President Kiir to leave power? In another way, we need also to ask, what are the fears of President Kiir preventing him not to leave power? And can South Sudanese in the roundtable conference or beyond it address these fears of President Kiir and give him guarantees and assurances that he can leave power and that he can work and cooperate to allow a successful transition out of the current situation, out of the current crisis that we are in, out of the current government that is dysfunctional? And this is something to be also provided not only for President Kiir, but also to somebody like Dr. Riek Machar, who has been his rival in this struggle. And what can we do to achieve peace and achieve a successful transition to peace, and even to form a government that will not include all the political leaders who have been locked in a struggle against the current government. Say, for example, if South Sudanese agree to form a government of technocrats, that is to say, a government formed by South Sudanese professionals who are not affiliated to political parties, whether in the government or in the opposition. That is to say, South Sudanese, in the interest of peace, may come to agreement to say, look, President Kiir, Dr. Riek Machar, Pagana Moom, and other political leaders, please step aside. And let us have a government formed by neutral, non-political South Sudanese professionals. That is to say, some of our university lecturers inside the country and outside the country who are experts in their fields, South Sudanese who are working with international organizations, who are working in the private sector outside the country, in diaspora, South Sudanese professional in the field of education to come and rebuild our educational system and set up our educational government organs and institutions, people who are economists and finance experts who can come and set up our economic and financial management systems, whether the bank or the Ministry of Finance or Commerce or others, and people who are experts in public health or medical doctors to set up our public health systems, people who are experts in agriculture and animal husbandry, who are working outside the country or inside the country, but not politicians like me or like those in power now. Then we answer the question, what do we do with the top leadership as an incentive for them to leave power and for them also to support the new system that we are going to put in place, because you need their support. These are questions that South Sudanese need to answer, because we are not engaged in conflict here. We are actually engaged in dialogue and in consensus building. And this must include President Kiir, unless he opts to choose that no, he is against all this and he wants to remain in power at all costs, and he is ready to fight and to suppress anybody who is talking about bringing change in the country or bringing peace in the country. And that will be against his will. Then it will be a different alternative. The people of South Sudan will not be cowed down indefinitely. They will be able to say, okay, let us develop a consensus. They will unite and they will push Kiir out. The roundtable conference, an inclusive roundtable conference, will be least costly, will cost all of us less, because it will come as a result of consensus building and agreement among ourselves. The alternative will cost South Sudan and will cost us South Sudanese much more higher. It may cost us blood, because you are talking about the people reaching to the point to bring peace, they will have to overthrow the government of Kir. And they will have to confront Kir and isolate him. So we are talking of popular action, an uprising in South Sudan capital, Juba, and other towns, and a revolt in the whole countryside, including the revolt by the people who are now threatened with hunger, to die with hunger. And when hungry people look for solution, when they see that their government is the one refusing peace and change in the country to take the country out of this crisis, they will move against them. And it may mean a lot of bloodshed on the side of the people, and also overthrow and bloodshed on the government. And I hope and I pray that President Kiir will not choose the path that was taken by Mobutu Sese Seko until he waited until he was thrown out, and then he went and died in exile shortly, or by Gaddafi, or by Omar al-Bashir. Remember, Omar al-Bashir used to say that there can be no intifada in Sudan, and that they have all the guns, and that they will be ready to kill people. Even Bashir was getting a fatwa to kill 2/3 of South Sudanese when he was being removed. And he was removed. He is now languishing in prison, and he's being taken to court. I hope and I wish President Kiir will not choose that path just simply because he wants to challenge all South Sudanese. The country cannot afford to continue in this situation where now you can see the reports from the UN are saying 2/3 of the people are in danger of dying with hunger. And 1/3 is already outside the country. And people are being made to fight themselves. They will turn on him. That will not be good. Let us not wait until the situation is out of reasoning and control. We should not wait for that time. Now is the time for us to go to a round table, rescue our country through consensus building. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, General Pagan. Actually, I remain only with 2 questions from my side. And then there is some question from the audience, those are listening in Clubhouse. And also there's a question from those who are watching from YouTube and Facebook. And then we'll take some of them, and then we'll let you go and we close the live video. And actually, maybe for those who are listening and those who are watching us here, maybe General Fagan will answer. We will not answer all those questions, but I'm thinking to think about a day according to his schedule, whereby he can come here just only for Q&A, question and answer. And that day, in the Voice of the People and South Sudan Political Club, we'll call it the Day of a Leader, Yom Al-Ghaid, and Samiu Hina Kaparnamij, Yom Al-Ghaid. And Badaga will announce it when I talk to him, because I need to see his schedule next week or the week after. So I'll good and ask before we take their question. Maybe we will not answer all questions, but I'm promising you guys will come again with General Pagan from the start just بداية بس هو سؤال وإجابة. أيزول يسأل سؤال بتاعه General Fagan يجاوب, he will answer that question as kind of interaction between the leaders and the people of South Sudan. So the second question before the last question, General Fagan, is actually South Sudan as a vicious cycle and the way out of this situation, General. What is your answer to that?
Yes, South Sudan is in a vicious cycle, and I would like my brothers and sisters inside South Sudan and outside the country to reflect with me together the situation we are in. First, it is a reality that for the last 17 years of our life, since we started to implement the comprehensive peace agreement leading to the referendum, for the last 17 years, we have been living in transition. The first 6 years were the transitional period leading to the exercise of self-determination. Almost that transition could have failed had it not been because some few leaders within the SPLM, especially those who were known as John Garang boys, if they were not to put up a fight against the National Congress Party, the exercise of right of self-determination would have not been carried out. Because during that transition, particularly from 2009, President Salva Kiir, as the chairman of the SPLM, had agreed with President Bashir and Ali Osman to postpone the referendum to 2017. Until that was opposed within the leadership of SPLM, and it was reversed. The NCP tried to obstruct the exercise of self-determination. And even in this, they tried to mobilize some other South Sudanese in what came to be known as the Kenana Group, a group that includes people like Uncle Bono Malwal, to oppose the exercise of the right of self-determination by the people of South Sudan on January 9th, 2011. The National Congress was forced to respect this part of the agreement, and the referendum took place on time. Also, the National Congress was pressured through a lot of efforts, both political, diplomatic, and also in the areas of security, with the command of the SPLA at that time, to allow the referendum to take place and also to accept the choice of the people of South Sudan, which was, of course, known that it was going to be independence. Now, we moved to the first transition after independence. With independence, we started the transition with a transitional government led by President Kiir from July 10th, or July 9th actually, because it was right from the day of independence, the new government was instituted, transitional government, that was meant to lead the country for a period of 4 years to 2015. And the task of that transitional government and transitional period was to build the institution of the state, of the independent state, and develop a permanent constitution for South Sudan with the participation of the people, and hold elections in 2015, free and fair elections in 2015. During that first transitional period, that is when the crisis within the SPLM started, leading to the country being taken to war, with that choice to silence the dissenting voices, voices which were calling for a need to return to the vision of SPLM to build a state, a South Sudanese state that is a servant state, a modern state capable of providing services to the people, and build a permanent constitution that will lead to establishment of a stable, peaceful, democratic system in which our people elect their government periodically in free and peaceful elections. Now, 2013, country was taken to war, with that factional conflict turning into ethnic conflict, with tribalism being used as an article of mobilization. In this period, there were two governments. The first government, led by Kiir and Riek Machar. The second government, led by Kiir and James Wanega. By 2015, we signed a peace agreement, and its implementation was delayed to 2016. And the third government was established in April 2016 with President Kiir as the president, Dr. Riek Machar as the first vice president, James Wanega as the second vice president. That government survived only for a few months. In July, it collapsed and the country was returned to war. And with the country returning to war came in the fourth government, which was now formed by President Kiir as the president, Taban Dengai as the first vice president, with James Wani as the second vice president. That government, from 2016, it continued, then got extended from 2018 to 2020. With the signing of the second peace agreement and the establishment of the fifth transitional government. The fifth transitional government, with President Kiir as the president and 5 vice presidents, with Dr. Riek Machar as the first vice president and 4 other vice presidents. A larger government. This government started to implement the agreement. It failed to implement the agreement. The transition now is coming to an end, and they have decided to extend its time in power for another 2 years to 2025, February 2025. So far, it is not able to implement the roadmap that they have agreed on. And it is clear that the country is much more deeper in crisis and in problems. The United Nations now is saying 2/3 of the population are in danger of starvation. 1/3 of our population are already outside the country as refugees in Uganda, in Kenya, in Congo, in Central African Republic, in Ethiopia, and in Sudan, where they are even not recognized as refugees, and where they are suffering a lot. Many of them have moved into Egypt. And there is less migration to the West, whether to Australia or to America, or very few are able to move beyond that. All these governments have been transitional governments. All of them have failed to deliver peace, to deliver permanent constitution, all of them have failed to hand over power to the people to elect their governments in free and fair elections. We are in failed transition to another failed transition. And we move from within the transition. When it comes to an end, it is extended. We extend it, and then the country goes back to war. And maybe the parties reach agreement and form a much more larger government than the one before, but a much more dysfunctional government. Like the current government is more dysfunctional than the government before it. We are trapped in a vicious cycle of failed governments moving to war, to peace agreement, to another transitional government that is also failed, and on and on. From what is being proposed, we will be moving to 2025, that is to say 19 to 20 years in transition, and there is no guarantee that South Sudan will emerge as peaceful or even with a stable political system with a permanent constitution. Following this development from how we began, the situation is getting worse by the time. And the failed governments is getting larger by the time. From a government that was small, it became bigger and bigger and much more bigger and consuming more resources, but also being in economic crisis and in difficulties with a much more larger deficit in budgets when there are budgets. Most of the time, we move from a government running on budget to a government running on an open budget or no budget at all. And from one crisis to another. That is the cycle we are in. The worst part of this cycle is the people are more divided, and the nation, the young nation as a nation of South Sudan, is fragmented much more. The majority of South Sudanese losing hope in the very idea of South Sudan itself. There are other South Sudanese who have reached now the point of not wanting to be South Sudanese, of thinking that maybe separating their region or their area is the best thing that can happen to them. Our state increasingly is becoming the worst failed state in the whole world. Our economy is more in crisis every time. Our people are displaced and forced into refuge in higher numbers. Like now, with these factional wars becoming communal wars and tribal wars and becoming sectional wars. This fragmentation of the nation is very clear and obvious to all South Sudanese. It is time for us to stop and think to reverse this trend, to change our direction. And the best way is for us to stop even conflict among ourselves and begin to think, how can we unite ourselves? How can we achieve consensus among ourselves? How can we achieve stability? Thinking outside the box. This is really the lessons we can learn from our experience. And this is what we can now see the end of South Sudanese nation disintegration. But it is not yet too late. We cannot give up. We can begin to think. We can begin to talk among ourselves. And that is the core of the call here. We can see very clearly the collapse of our state. If you can see what the government of South Sudan was delivering in 2005, 2010, is more than what it could deliver today. The state is shrinking and it is disappearing. And chaos and violence is taking over the larger part of South Sudan. This is a moment for us to say, to stop. What can we do about our state? Instead of saying, okay, the state will not protect you as a citizen. If you want to fight among yourself, you go and fight. And the few police and the few army which is there, the head of the state will say, I'm bringing them to protect myself. And if you are defeated, then you can come to Juba, where I can protect you as a displaced person. And you will not talk about what you have lost at home, because you will not open your mouth again. Because only if you are powerful enough to go and reclaim your right from those who have taken it from you. This is already what we are having now. But can this be our future? Can we not think of a way to turn things around, to develop an agreement to rebuild the state, reboot it, and then build it afresh? And ask ourselves, what type of a state do we need to have for us as South Sudanese? What will it do for us as a people, as citizens? What do we want from it? And what do we give to it? What do we surrender to it from us? Because all that power comes from us as a people. We want to build ourselves into and transform ourselves into a nationhood. How do we do that? And why do we want to do that? What do we want to pursue as a common program and project? These are the questions at the core of our attention now, because we are facing a collapse of the state. We are facing a disintegration of the nation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, General Fagan. The last question from my side, what would you like to see South Sudan achieve in the next 5 years from now, and how it will happen?
Well, the thing that we need to achieve within 1 year, first is for South Sudanese to begin this dialogue to rescue the country. And all South Sudanese have to wake up and have to join in. This is not a situation that can allow for any South Sudanese to be a spectator. This is a time to engage in rescuing the country, because the consequences of failing to participate in this national engagement will be collapse to chaos and disorder, where life is already getting very brutal. You can see it all over the country, including in Juba. So, South Sudanese, we have to engage nationally everywhere we are. We need to now be involved in how to rescue the country, in bringing our ideas closer and together, in building consensus, in building common grounds, in building mutual understanding, in rebuilding the social capital and the trust among ourselves as South Sudanese. By first rekindling the core ideas that made us South Sudanese in the first place. What made us as South Sudanese is that we reject being oppressed, we reject being marginalized in a state that does not belong to us. Now, we wanted to have our own state, to restore our dignity, to restore justice among ourselves, and to build a common project of changing our life and improving our life. A common project of creating wealth and sharing this wealth among ourselves in a spirit of justice and fairness, creating prosperity. That is why we want to build a state. That is why we want to transform ourselves from being tribes and tribal communities into a nation, one nation out of all these tribes. This is the project that we need to rekindle, and of persuading our brothers and sisters who are beginning to lose hope in the idea of South Sudan, who are thinking that the best thing that can happen is for them to separate their area. That disintegration, we know, is the condition for us to be oppressed and to be conquered again. And the need to be involved is very important. Each and every citizen who is conscious and aware about this, and at this time of crisis, everybody is waking up. We now need to create systems and forums to have this dialogue and consensus building mechanisms. With this, we are hopeful to achieve peace in South Sudan. Peace among ourselves as South Sudanese. End of conflict. Within these 5 years, we should be able to agree on a new political system in our country. We should be able to agree on a new political system based on political party, multi-partyism, in which power is entrenched in the hands of the people to elect our government in free and fair elections. In these 5 years, we should be able to turn our consensus into a transitional constitution and into a permanent constitution. Within the first 2 years, we should be able to transform these ideas and this consensus into a successful transitional government, hopefully a government by technocrats, to reboot the state and begin to rebuild it. And while we are supporting this government to build the system, the political parties also would have reached a political charter, a national charter, in which we agree that all the political parties will form themselves, will reorganize themselves, and will form national parties that are not formed by tribes, that are not formed by regions, but are formed from all over South Sudan, who agree to engage that the purpose of forming themselves into a party is to implement political programs, offering services, promising the people to carry out a very clear program of services to the people. At the end, where if you win, if this party win, everybody congratulates them. And the contest will be peaceful. It is possible for us to agree into that. And then the people will be the judge. The people choose their government by voting for this party or for this candidate, and under a system of rule of law, total stability, no more wars from now onward, only free, peaceful elections. I expect that our neutral government will organize the first elections. And the first government formed by the choice of the people in elections also commit themselves that by the end of their term in office, nobody will do any extension. You hand over power back to the people to elect the next government. Either your party is elected or your candidates are elected, or you lose, you move to opposition. You allow the space and hand over peacefully the power from the elected government to the newly elected government, or to the newly elected leaders by the people. That way, we can move on the path of state and nation building, building a stronger state every time, and creating wealth, creating jobs, developing our natural resources, our human resources, to make our society richer and richer. And of course, we join the other countries in the region, we join the rest of the countries in Africa to make our region wealthier, to make the continent wealthier, and maybe bring the center of the world, or the power in terms of economy and science and technology, back to Africa. Because Africa was once the center of the world, was the most developed civilization was here in Africa before it went to other places, before it went to Asia, to Minor Asia, or to Southern Europe, or to China by that time, or to the West. And Africa has that potential, but Africa will not reach to that potential unless each and every African state now put their act together, like South Sudan, stop these wars and begin this march of Africa to recover. This march of South Sudan recovering, East Africa will recover, and that is how it will happen. But of course, in the first 5 years, it would be to stabilize and rescue South Sudan from disintegration and reboot the state in South Sudan so that it is capable to restore and to regain power to serve the people, to protect the people, and to lead the people in that process of nation building a wealthy nation and rejuvenating the continent. Thank you.
Thank you, General Pagan. Actually, from our time, we remain with 10 minutes or 9 minutes. But I think we can go for just 30 minutes. I can take 3 questions from the question I have, and then we conclude. The other question, we can leave them for the next time. What do you think?
I think we should limit ourselves to the 10 minutes.
The 10 minutes?
Yes.
Okay. So there is one question here from, let me just take 2 questions. There is a question from Angelo C. He is asking, what is the incentive for the RRC's signatories to leave the power, in your opinion, General Pagan?
What is the incentive for Artigono?
Yeah, what is the incentive for the Tigono signatories?
Yes, or the RRC signatory to leave power.
To leave power, yes.
First of all, the number one incentive is that there will be peace in the country. If they are to leave power, they will leave power because we are agreeing, all of us, including them, to stabilize the country and to take the country through a successful transition to avoid the dysfunctionality of the Artigono itself. The Artigono now, they are divided among themselves. They are engaged in warfare among themselves. They are undermining each other. They are dividing the people, and they are waging war through these tribal conflicts all over the country. And the country is in crisis. The Artigono has failed to bring peace, is failing to bring peace, has failed to deliver on its promise to hand over power in this December to the people. That is the number one incentive. Now, if we agree on a new dispensation that is leading to stability in the country, they will, of course, be part of those political parties that will transform themselves, that will reach agreement to engage in a peaceful contest over power and subjecting themselves to the will of the people, instead of being in a dysfunctional government. These are incentive, a lot of incentives. It is also an incentive to those who are the political parties who are in the opposition. They will not need to continue fighting against this government to bring change, because we are able to reach a consensus. We are able to all together develop a consensus that lead to stabilization of our country and a transition to a system that will bring a stable democracy where we can engage to work to bring change peacefully in the country. It is the incentive.
Thank you so much. The second question is from Abel Kohn. He asking actually, why are you denying the other parties to participate in a proposed roundtable if it is for all South Sudanese?
We are actually calling on all the parties to participate in this roundtable. That's why you've heard me. We are calling on the parties in the government, the parties in the opposition, to all come together with our religious leaders, together with our women leaders, together with our youth leaders, for all of us to come together and build national consensus. So we are not denying any party to participate. Now, there has been an issue with the splinter groups from the political parties in the opposition. And what we are saying is that we are engaged in a process of unity. Any splinter group should engage in dialogue with the groups that have divided themselves, come together and join the process of national dialogue so that we are all together, not dividing and splintering ourselves. And that is to protect this process itself. That is what we are saying, and it is fair.
Thank you so much. The last question for this interview is from Robert Uhidi. Actually, he asking two questions, but I'm going to take just only one question. The next question, I will leave it for the next episode, whereby we will come here and ask and host you for the Q&A.
Yes.
You're asking, the SPLM key failed to implement agreements, national dialogues. How is this roundtable going to bear the positive result, General Pagan?
That is a very important question, but if he were to listen, he would have not asked the question. But anyway, let me repeat myself. We are saying that the roundtable conference should be a process where we build consensus among ourselves as the basis to build a new social contract that will be the basis to build a state in South Sudan and to build ourselves into a nation out of all the South Sudanese tribes. And the roundtable would address the failures of all the transitional government. Why have they failed to implement the peace agreement? And why have the transitional governments, why have they failed to achieve peace and sustainable democracy in South Sudan? These are questions that will be addressed. And the solution will be provided on the basis of having analyzed and worked out solutions to those failures. And that is why we are talking, instead of having a government formed by SPLM factions that fail, maybe we should think of forming a government out of South Sudanese professionals as a transitional government that we can trust in, that can implement these programs, transitional programs, with all our support. That is the solution. So you go beyond the system that has failed. If you are saying the SPLM factions that form government have failed to implement, then let us have a government which is not formed by SPLM factions. What type of that government it would be? How can we ensure success in achieving peace and transition to democracy in South Sudan? These are the issues that will exactly be addressed in the roundtable conference. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, General Pagan, for being with me here today in the interview. And also, I want you to deliver the final message to the people of South Sudan. Those are watching here through the Voice of the People Forum in Facebook and also in YouTube, and those are listening through the South Sudan Political Club in the clubhouse, and also those are still sleeping and also they are at work. They will come later on to listen to this interview. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Brother Edward, for hosting me in this second part of our engagement, which is basically around the current South Sudanese deep national crisis and the trap of South Sudan in this vicious cycle. The ideas that we have put forward are aimed at rescuing South Sudan from disintegration as a nation, are aimed to rescuing the South Sudanese state from the total failure and collapse into disorder and chaos in the country. And I would like to conclude with this message. And it is an appeal to all South Sudanese that our country, as you know, and as you have followed the development in the country and about the country, we have reached to an abyss, and we are just on the edge about to collapse into disintegration as a nation, and our state has reached to a point of total failure where South Sudan becomes a region that has no law and order, that is engaged in violence and is spreading all over the place, where our people are becoming displaced and are food insecure inside the country and are moving outside the country, becoming refugees and dependent on others. It is time for us to rescue our country. It is time for us to engage in serious dialogue and consensus building in developing what is common among us and uniting ourselves around these commonalities to take our country out of this crisis. We are proposing this process to lead to a roundtable conference in which all our political parties in the government and in the opposition participate, all our leaders, religious leaders participate, all our women leaders participate, all our youth leaders participate in developing a way out to peace and out of this war and violence into peace, out from political instability into a stable democratic system in which power is entrenched in the hands of our people to elect their government in free and fair elections, and moving away from the state capture by cliques to building a state that is able to serve the people of South Sudan, and a state that will help us to lead South Sudan into a situation where we can build and revive our nation into a prosperous nation, a nation that is united, living in peace and harmony, and celebrating our diversity as a source of strength instead of divisions and conflict among ourselves. This is a national call to all South Sudanese. If you are a religious leader, it is now time to act beyond preaching in the pulpit, but rather to join the rest of South Sudanese and provide that spiritual leadership to solve the problem and the crisis we are in, to end the wars, and to build a peaceful life, and to lead the people to build a prosperous country. If you are a woman leader who is tired of this violence against women in South Sudan, of this suffering of our people and the families, it is time to join in this effort and for women to take the rightful place in rescuing the country and in providing solution to build a country where we become equal citizen without any gender discrimination or gender violence in our country. If you are a young person, this is time for you, because we are discussing about a future peaceful and a prosperous South Sudan. And it is about your life. When we talk about the future of South Sudan, it is about you as young people. It is time to come and determine your own future, decide to build a peaceful and a prosperous South Sudan, which will guarantee a better life for you as young people. That is my appeal to all of you. It is not too late. It is doable. We can rescue the dream of a peaceful and prosperous, just South Sudan for all South Sudanese. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Honorable Pagan, the chairman of the real SPLM. Thank you for being with us here today. And also thank you for accepting the invitation. And thank you. We'll see you next time, and you have a good evening.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to meeting you again.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. We'll continue the discussion in the clubhouse. Let me just make a note to those who are actually watching us in YouTube and Facebook. The discussion will continue in clubhouse. And we have also Honorable Waldau is in the room up there, and he listened to the interview from the beginning. And also is one of the members of the non-signatories, those also arranging or organizing the roundtable. If there is question, General Pagan did not answer those questions. Honorable Waldau actually is in the room, and he will continue answering those questions. And also Abani and Meluk, they will moderate the next section for anybody want to make comments in regard to what have been said by General Pagan. You are highly welcome to join us. شكرا جزيلا للناس المشاهدين لمنبر صوت الشعب في فيسبوك وفي يوتيوب وكلاب هاوس، الناس المستمعين في منبر جنوب السودان السياسي. أننا هنقفل اللايف بتاعنا في فيسبوك ويوتيوب، ولكن أننا نكون مستمرين في كلاب هاوس، ومعنا واحد من القيادات بتاعت معارضة القائد هونربل والداو. ايزول لو في اسئله قبل فانا مو ما اجاوب عليه وكتبهم، هو ممكن يجاوب عليه. وايزول عندك تعليق لكلام فاغان قالوا، عندك كومنت ولا عندك سؤال لاي كلام فاغان قالوا in regard to round table، والداو يجاوب عليكم. شكرا جزيلا. انا بشكر الناس اللي شاهدونا في فيسبوك ويوتيوب، والناس اللي كانوا مستمعين في كلاب هاوس، والناس اللي هيجي يستمعوا لاحقا. وانا داير اعتذر لانه في ناس رسلوا لي اسئله كثيره. للاسف لقينا برمجنا الحلقه ده لمده 3 ساعات، لكن انا نعمل حلقه ثانيه مع جنرال باغان question and answers، يعني سؤال واجابه بالذات بخصوص الراوند تيبل والقضايا الملحه في الصحه. ان شاء الله ممكن يكون السبت الجاي او السبت اللي بعده. شكرا جزيلا وربنا يبارك فيكم. And you guys have a good evening, you have a good night, and you have a good morning. Thank you so much. Mehluk, Abani, you guys can take it over from there, and actually I will be busy a little bit. Thank you so much.